Welcome to HECTV's live interactive program that's part of St. Louis.
The whole production is pulled together.
It's going to be a steel bridge.
The way the cockpit is designed.
The highest rated green building in the world.
Welcome to HECTV Live. Welcome to HECTV Live, where today's program is entitled The Giver, Issues and Themes. Hi everybody, I'm Tim Gore, your host for HECTV Live, and I'm very happy to welcome you to the main branch of the St. Louis County Library System, where today we're being joined by a group of students from Ladue Middle School, some great folks from Metro Theater Company who are doing an upcoming production of the stage version of The Giver, and from 3 other schools who are joining us interactively throughout the country. We're being joined by a school in Minnesota, in Arkansas, and another school here in Missouri. Our purpose today is to talk about the exciting world that Lois Lowry has created in the young adult novel, The Giver. Students have had an opportunity to read that book and learn about what that book is all about and to give us the ideas of what they think is important in that book. We're going to talk about the issues and themes of the novel today, see what the students have to think, see what questions they have, and of course, as always with our interactive programs, we welcome your questions as well. If you're watching via the web or you're watching on television, then you can email us at live@hectv.org. That's live@hectv.org. We welcome your questions. Perhaps you read The Giver when you were in school, or it's a novel that your child is reading now, or you just remember reading it on your own. What did you think about it? We had the opportunity in October to have an hour-long conversation with the author Lois Lowry, and students from around the country had the chance to ask her questions directly. Part of what you'll see today as these students answer questions and think about the book is some comments that she has as well. So all of you will have a chance to meet Lois Lowry, so to speak, also. But today, right now, I want you to meet the great folks from Metro Theater Company who are with us for this program. Emily Coring, thanks so much for being here, Emily.
Thank you for having me.
Now let the world know, what is it you get to do at Metro Theater Company?
Well, I'm the education director, so I'm in charge of all our K through 12 education programs. We work in schools all over St. Louis City and County, and we use the arts to infuse the curriculum and make it more lively for students.
Thank you for being here. And to your left is Beth Slepian. Beth, let the world know what you get to do.
Hi there. I am Metro Theater Company's Teaching Artist Fellow. So that means that as Emily said, I work in schools and I use drama to teach curriculum and community building. And also with The Giver, I have written most of the content for the Parent and Educator's Guide to The Giver that we are giving to schools and who are coming to our production.
And as I mentioned at the start of the program, the Metro Theater Company is producing a stage adaptation of The Giver, which will be held in January at Edison Theater here at Washington University. And they're obviously working on all sorts of curriculum related to it, and we've been very excited to develop these programs with them in anticipation of that production. Today we're going to have a book club conversation about The Giver. We've looked at some different ideas, some important themes. Students have had a chance to look over those ideas in advance of the program and to begin to think about those ideas. We're going to talk about the concept of sameness. Memory and history, they're an important part of the book. The idea of growing up and making choices, and of course whether or not that society is actually a utopia or not, and what does it mean to have a perfect society, that type of thing. I'd like to start with just getting some general student reaction to the book itself and let each group introduce themselves. Let's go down to Norphlet, Arkansas first. Norphlet, I'll just ask you guys a question. What did you think about the book when you read it just in general? Is it a book that you're glad you read?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Cool, Norphlet. We're really glad that you're here with us today, and we look forward to your responses. Let's make sure that Hinckley Finlayson of Hinckley, Minnesota is in the bridge. Hinckley, welcome. So, Hinckley, just as a general comment, who would like to offer a general idea about something about the book? What did you notice? What did you especially like? What did you think was especially provocative? Whatever the case may be.
Oh, yeah, it was interesting on the entertainment sense of just being interesting to read, but it was well, once you read more into it, it became a much greater story.
Cool. That's nice to hear. Yeah, there's a lot in the book that you don't necessarily expect at the beginning. It seems to start pretty simply, pretty quietly, so to speak, and then you learn much more as the book goes along, and we'll talk about that in our conversation. I want to go to Wydown Middle School in Clayton. Wydown, thanks for joining us today. A general comment from you guys about the book?
All right. I thought that the book was a really good read and that it dealt with a lot of matters that I thought were very significant to our time period. So
Very
it was
cool.
a good book.
Great. And you had a second person, I think, Ms. Sermos, to give a thought?
Lindsay. Well, I thought the book was really meaningful to a bunch of things that are considered perfect that would not be considered perfect to everyone.
Very cool. We look forward to your responses throughout the program and our conversation, and I want to see what a student here from Ladue Middle School might have thought just in general about the book. Who'd like to offer an idea? I recognize this young man because Mordecai was here with us this morning, so I'm going to shock you all by actually knowing his name in advance. So Mordecai, go ahead and stand up and let the world hear what you have to say.
I thought it was a really good book. Like someone said earlier, it was very meaningful, and it also had to do with a little bit of our world. Like some of the things they had, like some of the problems they had in their world were kind of the same in our world, but it's very interesting and very sad at the same time.
Thanks, Mordecai. I'm looking forward to the students having the opportunity to hear from each other. Does the book resonate differently with you because you read it as an 8th grader as opposed to a 10th grader as opposed to a 5th grader, what the case may be? Does it resonate to you differently because you just happen to live in a different part of the country perhaps as well? Did certain things of the book emerge for you? So we're really looking forward to this book club discussion. The first discussion prompt area that we wanted to explore was the concept of sameness. Emily, why don't you give the audience out there in the big bad world, I suppose, in case they're not familiar with the story, when we talk about sameness, what kind of world has Lois Lowry created here?
Well, she has literally created a world where there are no differences between people. They've eliminated through science and through choices that a small group of people called the elders have made. They have no color, they have no music, they have no art. Everyone dresses the same. Marriages are arranged. You don't get to choose your husband. Everyone lives in the same kind of house. Your job is chosen for you. And basically your day, every day when you get up, you know exactly what to expect, you know exactly what's going to happen, and every day is the same.
And there may be some degree of comfort in that.
Yes, it sounds nice on the surface. When you start reading the book, you think, wow, what a nice world. They have no violence, they have no crime, people get along, everyone's nice and pleasant. But you quickly discover that there's an underbelly to that world that is not so pleasant.
Lois Lowry, in her Newberry Award acceptance speech, gives us the following information as she thinks about creating this world. She says, "I've never been a writer of fairy tales, and if I've learned anything through that river of memories, it is that we can't live in a walled world, in an only us, only now world, where we are all the same and feel safe. We would have to sacrifice far too much." So this concept of sameness or feeling safe, she really wanted to explore, and you'll notice in the book later on, the giver actually says, our people made the choice to go to sameness. We relinquished color when we relinquished sunshine and did away with differences. We gained control of many things, but we had to let go of others. So they've made a decision as a society to do this for a lot of reasons, and we don't necessarily have the backstory as to why they made the decision, but they've relinquished that. And we wanted our students to think about that, this concept of sameness. What was their reaction to it? What if we could, all control these factors of the environment, etc., good thing, bad thing, or whatever? And let's get the conversation started on that. Let's go to Hinckley first. Olivia, you had some thoughts about this. What would you like to say?
Gee, I don't know where to start. I think it's just kind of like, this is really nerve-wracking.
Don't worry about it, Olivia. Take your time. We're fine.
Okay. Like, I don't know exactly how to, start off.
Okay. Well, you had mentioned that you had talked about the fact that what would be your reaction if we had, of our society had the same kind of concept of sameness? You had talked about some ideas about that in some material you sent in advance.
Yes, I did. I said, how if our society had become the same, a lot of people wouldn't know the difference because they probably would have done it prior to people's birth, and talking about how things had been prior to sameness would be forbidden. It would just be really weird, but nobody would really know any different.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting concept of the book. I mean, we look at it from the outside of the book and think, my gosh, this is really odd, but obviously that's all Jonas has ever lived in his existence. Zach, I'll stay in Minnesota for a minute. Zach, you had some thoughts as well on this topic?
Yeah, I think they wanted to get rid of all differences because when you write it out on paper, it looks really good. It looks really clean. It looks really neat. It looks like it'll work great. But once they already put this action into practice, they, I mean, by the end of the book, Jonas realizes that this wasn't a good action, but people just don't realize, it doesn't click with them that, oh, this is actually not what we wanted. Now, their goal was to achieve perfect harmony with everything, and we can see that, you know, what is perfect harmony without distress? You can't, you don't have a compass to gauge good on when you don't have evil. So they wanted to just make everything the same, and through that eliminate supposed pain, but they also eliminated supposed happiness.
Yeah. Thank you, Zach. You make an interesting point there about how do you know evil without good? How do you know what you've got if you don't have anything to compare it to? Northwood, Arkansas, you had some thoughts on this. Alyssa, what were you thinking?
I thought it would be really good that they could control all of this, which would be like nature and environment stuff. But it was really bad because they were playing God.
Thanks, Alyssa. I'm going to ask you guys in Norfolk to make sure you speak a little louder or get closer to the microphone. I was able to hear you there, Alyssa, but make sure you're as close as possible to the microphone so that everybody's able to hear. Dakota, you had some thoughts on the novel in terms of this issue of sameness?
Yeah, I had thought that, I mean, if you eliminated the color, the terrain, the weather, so forth, you wouldn't have much of what you had now. You couldn't choose between what your color of your shirt would be, stuff like that. And you couldn't, like, slide down a hill or something.
Very cool. Thanks, Dakota. I want to go to Wydown Middle School in Clayton. Wydown, as we look at this issue of sameness and the way that Lois Lowry approaches it, what thoughts crossed your mind about its good points and its bad points?
Well, I thought that the sameness was kind of unfair because, like, they weren't, the people in the Utopia or Dystopia in The Giver weren't really respected for their differences or their unique talents, except for when they were given their assignments when they turned 12. Go ahead.
And is that, I want to follow up with a question about that for you, because I think that's a really interesting point about not being respected for their uniqueness, talents, or gifts. Do you think that's important? Is that something that in our current society you think is a strength, is a value that, about respecting people for their uniquenesses?
Well, yeah, because you would treat someone according to how they, like, what their talents and personalities were.
Okay, very cool. And I believe you have a second person there to offer a thought. Wydown?
Yeah. I think that the only reason they could go into sameness was by giving up all of their memories of happiness and pain, but, well, I guess they would make a safer world that way, but it would also be just kind of boring to live there, I guess.
Yeah. They create all sorts of safety and security, but they do give up a great deal. Ladue folks, what thoughts do you have about this topic? Mordecai, would you be so happy to kind of pass to the young lady right there in the gray? Stand up, please, and what's your name?
Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Okay, so I think that, like, every day we should, like, strive to, like, accept others, and I think sameness goes totally against that and, like, basically gave up and made it so you have to, and, yeah.
Okay.
And it also, like, in the book it says, like, when Jonas and the Giver were talking about sameness and stuff, the Giver says, well, you could make the wrong mistake, the wrong choice, but we learn from mistakes, and so I just think you lose a lot of learning in life.
That's right, and they kind of said sacrifice learning. It was all going to be a small group of people who, in essence, did the learning. You had a thought, young man, right behind her, right there. Go ahead and stand up, sir.
When I first started reading the book, I thought that this is a terrible way to run the society. It struck me as this is what Hitler tried to do. But as I kept reading and I read about sameness, I thought that since taking away memories and all this, everything is the same, might soften the blow because they don't know that they could do anything different.
I think that's a very interesting point. It's like she has to create it's a very controlled environment. And could you have sameness? Could you have that concept of egalitarianism as they perceive it if she had let them have memory? Because if you have memory, then you know potentially about an experience that you had that was different than somebody else's. So I think you make a very good point about that, and that's a nice segue to our second discussion area. We're going to talk about memory and history. Emily, Beth, based on what you've heard the students say, what thoughts would you like to offer on this topic?
Well, I think that Lois Lowry is so brilliant at giving us warnings. And, you know, oftentimes in our society, actually, people who are different are not treated well, and they are singled out. And I think that she's warning us about what might happen if we don't learn to honor our differences in a better way. And she takes it to the extreme.
Well, let's hear what Lois Lowry actually had to say a little bit about this, and this will provide us a nice segue to our conversation about memory and history as well. She talks about sacrifices here.
It's a world that has given up, has sacrificed human emotions, so people don't love one another. They're very polite, but they don't really care about each other. They also have lost literature. They have no books. They have no art. They have no music. Can you imagine a world with no music? Do you want to live in that kind of world? No, I don't think so. So, no, the answer to your question is no, I certainly do not want to live in that kind of world. I wasn't writing about the kind of world that I would enjoy living in. But there are things about their world that I think we could hope to, that we could aspire to. It would be nice if we lived in a world with no war and no crime and no poverty. But we don't want to sacrifice the important things that those people in the book have given up.
We've talked a lot about that concept of sacrifice already this afternoon, and I think that's going to continue to be part of the conversation. And thanks to that last comment, we can move easily into our second discussion area, which is all about the concept of memory and history. Because obviously a centerpiece of the book is the fact that people have no memories beyond their daily life now, that somehow the society at some point made the decision to reject that. And we don't necessarily know why they did, but they have. And they've all basically at this point accepted it blindly now. What made the author think about that as an idea? When we had the chance to talk to her in October, she gave us the insight as to where that idea originally came from.
I began by thinking about memory. And the reason I was thinking about memory is because my father was very old and he was losing his memory. And I began to think how important memory is. And what if there were a way we could control memory in people? What if I could magically maybe put my hands on my father's head as he sat there in the nursing home and bring his memory back? What if there were people who could do that, a whole community who could do that? And when I sat down to write the book, I realized that because that wasn't true yet, I would have to set the book in the future. So I just made it an unnamed time. People often ask me, what year is this book taking place? And the answer is, I don't know. It's sometime in the future. But it's a time when technology has developed to the point where they can actually control human memory.
So I thought that was very interesting when she told us that, in terms of where she began to get that concept of wanting to play with memory, having a father who seemed to have lost his, and the idea that she wanted to give him memory, but there was also some sense of maybe discomfort that her father was having because maybe he had the sense that he had lost memories that he couldn't get back. And so how do you balance that out, that sense of discomfort? Do you eliminate all memories so you don't have to ever worry about that? Or do you want to create memories so that discomfort still exists? Are we better off? Are we more human because of that? She says in the book, the giver actually explains to Jonas that there's so much more than the world of only us, only now, he says. There's all that goes beyond, all that is elsewhere, and all that goes back and back and back. It is how wisdom comes and how we shape our future, he says. And I think part of what you all have spoken to some extent already is like how our memories enable us to make wise choices and get us to think about those ideas. Let's switch the order up a little bit. We'll continue to rotate. Wydan, I'll go to you guys first this time. What are your thoughts about this theme of memory and history, about its importance? And then we'll go up to Minnesota.
That people would be a lot worse off without memories because they wouldn't have like the talent that people had back then, and they wouldn't have the knowledge that people had, because if the people
did something bad, like say slavery, now we know how wrong that is, and I think some people are taking those memories for granted because there's still slavery in the United States.
Oh, interesting point. Thanks so much. Why, Dan, a second thought from you guys?
Well, even though like taking away memory might seem like a good idea in the short run, we wouldn't gain anything because we'd continue to make the same mistakes we had made in the past.
Okay. Cool. Thanks very much. Let's go up to Minnesota. Travis, you had a thought.
Yeah, I thought that if we didn't have memory, we wouldn't really know how we survived in the past or how we came to be who we are. We wouldn't really know who our leaders were or our back history about wars and everything like that, and we wouldn't know really who the first people to come to the world were and experience or explore the new land. There would be no stories or nothing to pass down from generation to generation.
And those stories are extremely important. They are what makes us us. The interesting thing about the novel is that the memories exist, but they're very tightly controlled. There's the giver has memory and has knowledge and can give it to another person, but there's no sense of collective memory, and there's no sense of individual distinctive memory. The fact that my life was different than your life, for example, Beth. And why do you think, you know, what makes that kind of intriguing about the novel in terms of like the power potentially to control memory? Like if I'm the giver, I could take that memory and just plunk it out and decide to do something with it. You know, how do I lose my control if I don't have my individual memory anymore?
Well, I think to me bring up an interesting point, because I think one of the tensions in this book, and first I want to just say that everyone's comments so far have been so insightful and have really been making me think about these themes as well. But with this idea of memory, there is this difference between individual and collective. And mother and father in this book, they can remember their own childhoods, and they do talk about, oh, when I was your age, I remember being nervous before my ceremony of 12s, and they have this individual idea, but then because they lack this collective past, they aren't, as people have been saying in this conversation, they have no way to learn from the people who came before. And because of that, I think their world is just missing a great amount of knowledge, vast amount of knowledge.
Arkansas, let's go to you guys and see what thoughts you have, and then we'll come here to our students at Ladue. Chucky, you had some thoughts?
Yeah. The reason history was important is it shaped the way to our future.
Oh, excellent. Very good point. Caitlin, you want to add something?
I think it would be hard to not have memories because you have to like learn everything again and everybody again.
Yes, mistakes are a great teacher, or just attempts are a great teacher in terms of a lot of things. You'd have to relearn. Kelsey, you had a thought on this as well.
Like people are supposed to learn from their past, and if you didn't have memories, you wouldn't be able.
Let's continue. Ladue, what do you guys think? Who's got the microphone? Will you pass it to Rachel there, please?
So, I think that having like sameness is like really stupid, because then you can't, like choose what you want to do. Everyone decides for you, and that's just like boring, because it's like, why would you want to do that?
Yeah, when you look at the outside, when you look from this world from the outside in, it seems exceptionally boring. I don't know I'll say it's the sad thing about their existence is they don't know how boring it is. Right. They have no concept of boring because they have no concept of interesting. I mean, I can't remember the student who said it before. It was the good versus evil comment, I think, that came from Minnesota. But it applies to all sorts of things. It's like, I have no idea how bored I am if I don't know how interesting things can be. I have no variety of life, so I guess this is all I can understand. Other thoughts here from Ladue? Anybody else? Let's go all the way, pass it all the way across to the young lady there in the blue. What's your name, dear?
Sammy.
Hey, Sammy.
Well, I kind of think that having memory kind of makes you, like not having memory kind of makes you go backwards instead of going forwards, like, because, like, if we didn't have the knowledge to make something, then they would never make it, because it kind of seems like they don't have much technology as we do in the Jonas' community. And so if we didn't have the memory of making it, they probably would never make it, so we would never have it.
Oh, that's an interesting point, because they do kind of seem, they're technologically advanced in a lot of ways, because obviously they have created all sorts of medicines to control things and any number of other things. But they also seem kind of like technologically unadvanced. We're going everywhere on bicycles. And while that's a very clean source of transportation, obviously, maybe there could be a more technologically exciting clean source of transportation. It's kind of an interesting little dichotomy. Emily?
Well, Beth and I had an interesting conversation at lunch about what did they study at school, these kids. They couldn't have had social studies because then they'd be studying history, which they don't have. They couldn't study science because then they might invent something that's not allowed in the community. And so probably at school they might learn arithmetic and how to read on a basic level. And they are getting a very shallow education. They have to be.
Obviously, they would learn how to say the right word in the right circumstance, because Asher gets in trouble for not knowing the right word. You had a thought, I believe? Pass the microphone right on up. Hi.
Hi. Well, I was thinking about not having any memories, and I was thinking about if you didn't have any memories about like hunger and stuff like that, you wouldn't be able to appreciate what you have. So they don't know that they can appreciate their community because they think other communities maybe aren't as good as them, but they still can't really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a really interesting point. I think that's right. They have no sense of how to appreciate it. Let's Lois Lowry finish our conversation on this topic as she talks a little bit more about memory.
I mean, you guys that I'm talking to, you students are, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. You don't have the long lifetime of memories that I do, but you certainly have plenty of memories, and you've experienced a lot of stuff, and you've felt a lot of emotions. I've lived to be in my 70s, and for example, here's a sad but good example. One of my children has died. One of my children was killed in an accident. That's part of my memories. It's part of what makes me human, having experienced that kind of sadness. And you've all experienced sadness. The people in The Giver have not. People in The Giver have never been sad. And so that is part of what makes us human, I think. The memories, the things we experience and think about and live with and talk about to each other. Those are things that make us very human.
I think that concept of humanity is really important throughout the book. What makes us human? A lot about what we're talking about really comes down to that. We're human because we have differences. We're not all the same. We're human because we have memory, and our memories are individually different. Our collective memories are different even than our individual memories. And obviously our sense of memory is different than the creatures who roam this planet with us who aren't human. Another aspect that really makes us human is this whole concept of choice making, or the lack of ability to make choices, which is a central focus of the novel. And that was one of the areas that we also wanted the students to think about, is the importance of making choices. And obviously Jonas really has no sense of that at all until he becomes the person who's going to be the next giver, and the next receiver of memory, and he's going to learn about the fact that he can make choices. And he gets into a conflict himself. We've got a couple of quotes from the book to demonstrate that conflict to you. In the first, he says, it's not fair. He learns this from the giver, and he says, oh my gosh, it's not fair that nothing is color. If everything's the same, then there aren't any choices. I want to wake up in the morning and decide things, a blue tunic or a red one. I mean, I know it's not important what you wear, but... And then the giver chimes in with, it's the choosing that's important, isn't it? It's not necessarily what you decide to do, it's the fact you can decide to do something. And Jonas begins to ponder this, and not just one page later in the novel, he says, wait a minute, if people were left to make their own choices, he says, maybe things would definitely not be safe. I can't even imagine it. We really have to protect people from wrong choices. So there's this kind of like attraction to choice, and also a worry about choice, which I guess is very, very human, because we all are excited about the possibility of making choices. Let's find out what you guys thought about this issue. Let's start in Arkansas, and then we'll move around this time. Sydney, you had some ideas about this concept of making choices. What did you want to offer?
Yes, I have what I think is that it's important to make decisions, because if you don't make decisions, you don't know what to do in this world. Maybe your parents don't let you make some decisions because they've made the mistake of doing stuff and they don't want you to make that mistake.
Yeah, decisions actually make you who you are to a large extent, because you decide certain things. It really forms the kind of person you are. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. Is it Tiona or Tiana from Northfleet? Go right ahead.
Tiana. Okay, I thought like every little kid goes around and they ask the same questions like why is the sky blue and why is grass green. Well, if we never got to ask those questions and if we never got to challenge society, we'd never know anything. We wouldn't have any of the thousands of advances we have today. Like, say, we wouldn't know if the stove is hot or not. If somebody told us, don't touch the stove, we would only know that, hey, the stove's hot, but we'd never know the warmth of the stove.
Right. To a large extent, being human means that you're able to be autonomous. You're able to make decisions on your phone, and she's really on your own. I guess you can make decisions on your phone as well, depending on who you want to call. But she's really created a society, Emily, that's pretty much like automatronic.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's kind of a nice thought sometimes to think, I can get up in the morning and I don't have to choose anything. Everyone just does everything for me. That's so easy. That's great. But, you know, you all are teenagers or preteens, and I think making choices is a big issue to you because some choices you can make, right, and some choices your parents won't let you make yet. So, you know, but we're lucky in our society. We do get to make choices. So.
Wydown, what do you guys think about this topic of making choices?
Well, we thought it was a lot about learning from the choices that you make, like learning how to deal with success and failure, and how that can impact like the choices that you make farther on in your life.
Okay. Good thinking. A second thought from Wydown?
Well, I think choices are like gambles. It's not depending on whether it's safe or not. It's about gambles. We always ask this question, is it safe? What's the risk? Choices are sometimes clear, like the air around us, we can't even see it. So it's so clear, but the shadows is so black that we can't see anything. So I think the society is trying to block any risks to those gambles. What if we choose wrong?
Interesting. I like that. Some things seem so clear. I like that a lot. Let's go up to Minnesota. Zach, you had a thought about this?
Yeah. Just about the. Let's see. I wrote about here the importance of choices. The ability to choose makes everything meaningful. If I was forced to do everything, it wouldn't mean anything that I do something. You must wear a black shirt today. So I wear a black shirt, and does that black shirt represent anything? No. Why are you wearing that black shirt? Because somebody told me to. No, if you could choose to wear a black shirt or a red shirt and you wear the black shirt, I mean, this is kind of a ridiculous example, but things have the ability to stand for something when they're chosen to be done or not worn, done, just done.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Zach. I think that's a really interesting point. Is that the act of choosing, kind of like the giver says, makes all the difference. And it's like if I'm just arbitrarily being told that I'm going to have scrambled eggs that day, then it doesn't matter diddly squat to me. But maybe just the act of being able to decide for myself that today I'm going to scramble eggs as opposed to have frosted mini wheats in my cereal bowl makes it kind of just like a happier morning for me because I get to have that kind of choice. Alicia, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Alicia, you had some thoughts?
Yeah. If you don't have the ability to make your own decisions, nothing really has as much meaning as it would if you got to, same as what Zach was saying. If you worry about what decisions you have to make, yeah, it's going to affect what you do more than if you just told what you have to do.
Okay, very cool. And Michael, I think you had some thoughts up there as well.
Yeah, I did. I was kind of thinking how, freedom, that's basically the right to make choices. When people have freedom, they kind of lessen the power of whoever's governing them. So I think when the elders created the community, they wanted to make sure that nobody would ever try to ruin the community. So they tried to make freedom, eliminate what choices people can make. And so just ensuring that they are always up there and they're never going to be challenged in their position.
I think that's an interesting point, because we're constantly challenging things. I mean, one of the things that makes society change, modify, improve is because you're able to challenge authority, and there's no sense of authority. I think isn't it Jonas who's shocked in the book when he's able to, the giver says we can turn the speaker off, and he didn't realize that could ever happen. That's like an amazing moment in time. I can choose not to listen. Sometimes the choice might be to ignore somebody. Now, I'm sure that never happens with you talking to your teachers, naturally. LaDue, some thoughts for you guys about this making choices issue? Who hasn't had a chance to speak yet? Who has some ideas? Let's pass it over to these two young ladies who haven't had a chance to speak yet. Let's start with in the gray sweatshirt first.
Well, I think when your choice is taken away, it's kind of like you're not really living your own life. Someone else is living it for you, because you don't get to choose what you're doing. Someone else is kind of, well, yeah, someone's like telling you how to live. And talk about it from the perspective, I'll put you on the spot again for a minute. Like, obviously, at some point, your parents are making choices for you. Yeah.
And sometimes that's no big deal to you. But if there's been moments in time where your parents have made choices, or your teacher has made choices, or your older brother has made choices, whoever the case may be, we'll make your parents out to be the bad folks here. What's your response when that choice isn't the one you would want to make? What do you just naturally kind of respond with, feeling?
Well, normally, like, me personally, I kind of get kind of mad when, like, someone chooses something that I don't really want, and I could have had the choice to make my own, and yeah.
And that sense of independence is something Jonas doesn't get, of course, until the very end of the book, which we'll talk about next as we go up. Yes, young lady, stand right on up.
Choice is very important. I mean, like, imagine if we didn't get to choose our president, we would have rules that we didn't agree with, and society would be different. And choice is just very important, because then you have more freedom, and you just have the option of doing things, and it just makes you happier.
And obviously Lois Lowry chose in some interesting ways. There's no music, there's no sound, there's no color in this society. She's basically taken out anything that might cause them to think about choice to a large extent. Emily?
Right, so they don't know what they're missing. And I think it's really interesting, a couple people commented that choices have meaning. Choices give meaning to your life because you own your choices. And we live in a democracy where we're allowed to make choices. And I think that that's another warning Lois Lowry has given us, is if we give up those rights, you know, we are becoming less free. Even though these people think they have a great life, they're not free.
She talked about this. One student question that we had from our conversation with her in October was asking her about what she thought was the most important theme or lesson in the book. She began by saying, well, you know, all sorts of ideas are important, and then she eventually succumbed and said, yes, one does make a difference, and she talks a little bit about choice here. Let's hear what Lois had to say.
But for me, one of the important things in the book, The Giver, is to understand the importance of choices that we make as human beings. And you can even bring that down to political choices. You know, we all, once we're adults, we vote and we choose who we want our leaders to be. The people who live in the world of the giver, they've sacrificed a lot of stuff. And so I think that's an important thing to remember. They've sacrificed freedom, really. They have a lot of good stuff in their world, but they have really no freedom. And so I think the message that I would take from the book is that we must be very, very careful about the choices we make and the sacrifices we make.
And Jonas has a moment in the book where he has to deal with that head on. He has to be very, very careful about a choice that he's going to make. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the book, Beth, let's talk a little bit about this moment where he's going to choose about what he's going to do about the boy Gabriel. Who is Gabriel, and what's his relationship to Jonas in the story?
Sure. Gabriel is a new child. Jonas's father is a nurturer at the nurturing center, and Gabriel is a child born there who's not developing as quickly as the other children. And so Jonas's father takes Gabriel home and cares for him. And one of the things he actually warns to their family is, you know, we can't get too attached to him because he will be assigned to some other family. But then it becomes clear, although his family is caring for this child, and Jonas is a great help to caring for this child as well, Gabriel is still not able to sleep through the night, and he doesn't do a good job when he goes back to the nurturing center. And so it is decided that Gabriel is going to be released, and which for anyone who doesn't know, essentially means they're going to euthanize or kill this child because he's not fit to be in the community. And Jonas is faced with this decision: do I leave this community and take Gabriel with me to save him? And also, I mean, I think for Jonas, a lot of it is, and to save myself and to save my community and give them so much more.
And when he's confronted with this is Jonas's big moment, so to speak, to grow up. I mean, a lot of what this book is all about is choice in society and how you're going to interact in that society, and what kind of society do you want to create and how do you want to interact with it. And Eric Coble, who's the playwright who adapted the novel, who's the playwright of the adaptation that Metro Theater Company is going to produce, was really struck by this kind of metaphor of growing up. And he talked about it when he talked about writing the play. He said he thinks The Giver is a metaphor for what it means to grow up. When you're young, he says, there's no before. There's what I'm feeling right now, what I'm enjoying right now, and then suddenly someone says, well, did you ever know there was this history? Did you ever know that people suffered and had wars? The point is different in everyone's life, but for all of us, there's a progression to where you suddenly realize it's a much bigger world than you thought it was. And it's at that moment in time, Coble's thinking, that's when you start to grow up. You begin to realize that there's so much more to the world than you thought there was. And you begin to see your place in the world and think about how you relate to the other people in the world. And obviously for Jonas, this is a huge potential decision. I mean, for some of us, it might be a very minor decision that we first start to realize that. But for Jonas, it's a huge decision. And he makes the decision to take Gabriel and leave the society, the community that he's in, even though he knows that there's going to be all sorts of repercussions for that act. And that is a huge act of maturity and growing up. Minnesota, let's find out what you guys had to think about this thought about Gabriel's response. Michael, I know you had some ideas about it.
Yeah, I kind of saw like how his awakening. I had one something like that when I went to Gettysburg, and I realized how many people can just die in like a short period of time, and I kind of realized that war is just terrible. And yeah, like growing up, it's kind of like realizing that there's bad things in the world that you never really knew about. Yeah.
Yeah, we're very insulated as kids growing up, and that's really important, obviously, to our ability to grow up, is to be insulated from that. But at some point, the world begins to creep in, so to speak. Lauren, you had some ideas you wanted to add?
Yeah, I really think that he made the right decision when he took Gabriel away from the community, because, I mean, even if things like he got caught or something and he got punished for that, he probably would be released too and everything. But I think that he did end up saving Gabriel, and I think eventually the community did go back to where they were able to make choices after probably, I mean, at least like 20 years. I think it took a long time to go back to that. But I think it did have a really good effect on the community afterwards, at least in my head. And that at the very bottom, even if everything else didn't happen the way that he planned it to, he at least saved Gabriel's life, and that's a really good thing.
Thanks, Lauren. I think those are very interesting points. And obviously, we had the chance to talk with Lois Lowry about the ending of the novel. And lots of kids had questions before about the ending of the novel and wanting to know, like, if Gabriel and Jonas had made it and what had happened to the society. And she talked about the fact that she wanted it to be ambiguous. She wanted people to have their own ideas about that, though she realized when people began to respond to the book that everybody else wasn't too happy with her about that necessarily. And so she gave some additional information which gives you some hints about the possibilities of what happened. And I'll give you just a little tease that you can see that whole conversation on our website at hectv.org. So if you want to look that up by going to that webpage, then you can find out what Lois said about what may have happened as a result of Jonas's decision to take Gabriel. I think you got some good ideas there, Lauren. Matt, you had some thoughts up in Minnesota as well.
Yeah, I kind of thought he definitely made the right choice when taking Gabriel and leaving the community. He finally had a moment of awakening where he's like, hey, like a bunch of this stuff that the government is controlling is really not right. Like, it was more corrupt because they were just hiding what they were doing. And as we stated before, they just really took freedom away. So then he decided, hey, I got to explore this world and take Jonas away. By doing that, I think the community, they just went into a disarray and confusion. And I think what the leaders would have done is they would have like tried to hide what happened and kind of just decide to like keep it secret, but then eventually people would start to wonder, and then it would be confusion and rage, and hopefully they'd figure that out.
Hopefully so. So Matt, in your mind, even though you know that all those consequences potentially are going to happen, that there is potentially great chaos, that society might be thrown into upheaval, you still balance it out that Jonas made the appropriate decision?
Yeah, I really think he did, because taking a life away in any situation is not right at all. So by doing that, he had to do that.
Cool, thanks. Let's go to Wydan, and then I'll go to Arkansas, and then we'll come back here to Ladue. Clayton, what do you guys think about this issue about Gabriel being taken by Jonas and the whole issue of growing up in this book?
I think that he made the right choice because Gabriel would have been killed. Also, I think that the community would have been sad because they failed again.
I really think that he made the right choice because they were going to kill an innocent baby who hadn't done anything ever. And I think that definitely they decided to go back to the way things had been before, realized that sameness maybe wasn't the best way to be because they were missing out on so much.
Cool. Thank you for those thoughts. Let's go down to Arkansas. Chris from Northfleet, you had some ideas.
Yeah, I thought he made the right decision because Gabriel has a better chance of learning new stuff and how to live life like we do.
Yeah, and it's that, in essence, he doesn't just make a choice for himself, obviously. He grows up. He also provides the opportunity for Gabriel to grow up as well. And one of the intriguing things is it's not just one act of me changing society, it's an act of potentially all sorts of changes to society because Gabriel is also going to emerge here as a life force. Beth, listening to these comments, what thoughts do you have you want to add to this conversation? Then we'll get some Ladue thoughts.
Well, I think these are very insightful comments, and you know, I think I mentioned this morning, but I think that for Jonas, this choice to take Gabriel or not to take Gabriel almost wasn't a choice because it was so just a given that Jonas was able to love this small child, and because Jonas understood this idea of love, this choice was in a way already made for him. Even though he has that power then to make the choice, I think that for him that was the only acceptable choice.
Because it's almost like at that moment in time, because he's been able to understand what love is in a way that other people can't really, since my spouse has been picked for me, my child has been picked for me, my child's name has been picked for me or whatever. I understand what love really is now, and it's like I'm going to give myself into that. I'm going to give myself up to love and up to humanity, and I'm just going to choose what is just the right human thing to do, or the natural human thing to do.
Which goes back to the same theme of growing up, and Jonas learns, wow, there's so much more, and I can love, and I can grow up to be a more knowledgeable human being and a more active human being.
Ladue, thoughts from you guys? Who's got the microphone? Where am I finding the microphone? Let's go over here to this fine young lady, Miss Arrow Postal, who hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Pass that right on over. Mordecai, would you be so kind to pass that over? Oh, there it goes. Hi.
There's a point in everyone's life when they become an adult, and I think in The Giver they took that away from them, that they still physically grow up, but emotionally they're still really immature. So.
I think that's a very interesting point. This is definitely Jonas's opportunity to emotionally grow up. Yeah, because to a large extent, is Dad as emotionally grown up as Jonas? When Dad's just, I mean, you might argue that he's not as emotionally grown up because he's just going to allow Gabriel to be released. Right behind you, there's a comment.
Well, I think Jonas really grew up like when he realized the consequences that would happen if he didn't take Jonas. And also the consequences that would happen to his community if he didn't act. Like, the community might just fall apart if he doesn't, like, the Giver doesn't give the memories, and he doesn't, like, run away with Gabriel.
Oh, very cool. Great ideas. All right, ladies, I can see you're all anxious. Mordecai, we'll go to you next, and then we'll cross over.
I think Jonas grew up because his actions proved that, he was going through a major emotional time because of what the Giver was showing him and because of all the things he had seen and he when he left the community, it helped him grow up even more and helped him realize that his community needed help emotionally. Like, they needed a lot of help. And so by taking Gabriel away with them, that they would realize what they're doing is wrong and try to at least fix it.
Okay. Good thinking. Good thinking. And ladies, I'll let you guys get in when we start going to our next point about utopia and those kinds of things. You can weave these thoughts in as well. But I want to make sure, because we've got some time, to get to that point also. Because what Lois Lowry has created here is a world that seems at the beginning to be perfect, right? I mean, Emily, it's lovely. I mean, wouldn't you want to, you said before that you'd think you'd like to live there, right? It's clean, there's no pollution.
There's no violence, there's no crime.
It's
Everyone's happy and nice to each other.
Right, it's a really nice place to live. And so she was really intrigued about this concept of utopia and what it meant, and could you actually develop a utopian world. In her Newberry Medal Award acceptance speech, she said the following: "In beginning to write The Giver, I tried to make Jonas's world seem familiar, comfortable, and safe, and I tried to seduce the reader. I seduced myself along the way. It did feel good, that world. I got rid of all the things I fear and dislike, all the violence, prejudice, poverty, and injustice. And I even threw in good manners as a way of life because I liked the idea of it. It was very, very tempting to leave it at that. But then she said to herself, there's got to be something more. And she talks about that a little bit more in this video excerpt from our conversation we had with her last month.
So it became a kind of world that was almost or seemed close to perfect. And I set out, sitting there at my desk, I wrote the kind of rules that would govern such a society where the boy lived. But as I began to write the book and describe the place where he lived, I realized that there was an underside to it that was deeply troubling. And that's what made the book interesting. But in the beginning of the book, I wanted you to feel as though this would be a very cool place to live. Nobody is poor. Nobody is bullied. People are polite to one another. They pay attention to their language. Dinner is delivered to their homes every night. The moms don't even have to cook. And also, everybody's equal. Moms and dads, females and males are equal. They have jobs that are equal. Dad in the book is a child care worker, and mom is a kind of judge. But those jobs in this society are of equal value. And I thought that was an important part. There's no sexism in the book, in the community where he lives. So that's how I started thinking about it. Make it as nice as possible, as comfortable as possible, so that people reading the book will think, hey, I'd like to live there. And then very gradually let them in on the secret of why they wouldn't like to live there.
It's like she wanted to create this deliberate double-edged sword, this careful balancing act between utopia, perfect society, and dystopia, all the chaos in society. And she wanted to get us all comfortable and then kind of like slowly twist the knife underneath us so that we could feel the pain of what is supposedly a perfect world. Let's find out what our students thought about this topic. Why down? A comment from you guys about this whole vision of utopia versus dystopia?
True utopia is impossible to come by, because even though you might have an efficient society, there might be no pain, no hunger, it's not worth it. You lose so many things, and like we talked about earlier, with no choices and the government just rules everything, it's not worth living for, even if it's supposedly perfect.
Cool. A second thought from Why Down?
Well, I thought in Jonas's utopia, it was basically just a delusion from reality, and in ways it was a bargain with the devil.
Oh, interesting phrasing. Minnesota, what do you guys think? Matt, you had some ideas about this double-edged sword.
Yeah, I really kind of like thought that like by just eliminating things that were bad, they tried to make what they call a just world, but like when they kind of like hide things, it gets to where like the government pretty much controls everything in a bad way, and that's why, like going way back when we like created the United States, that's what they tried to eliminate. But then example of like where this was extreme was like when they created the USSR, like communism, like when they made choices, and in a kind of discrete way, that's what the world in The Giver was like.
Okay, good. I think those are some nice things to think in terms of real-world examples about this, about how we've obviously attempted to create utopian societies throughout human history. And there's all sorts of examples of that, both in the United States as well as other countries. And all of those utopian societies have somehow failed in one way or the other, either from inside or outside forces. So I think it's good to think in terms of those real-world examples. Let's go down to Arkansas. We've got about 3 minutes left. Arkansas, a thought from you guys on this topic?
I thought they were like really close to being a utopia, but there was no possible way that they were going to achieve it if they're going and killing little babies and spinning out old people.
Yeah, it's like in order to create their utopia, they've done all sorts of things that are very, if it's a word, dystopic, very, very violative of what a utopia should be all about. I know we've got some thoughts here from our good friends at Ladue. Ladies, I said I would start with you, and sure enough I will. Go right ahead.
Okay, so it sort of goes along with growing up. Like, if you have it all perfect and then you want them to grow up, it's just going to be way too overwhelming for one person to handle, to have everything just so perfect and then all of a sudden have this choice and all these things that all of a sudden, hey, I didn't know about this. What's going on here?
Yeah, how would you relate? How would you all of a sudden balance all that out, get all that straight in your mind? I think that's an interesting point. Rachel, you had an idea?
Yeah. So I think that there's no way you like can have a utopia, because it's like you try and you like you say, well, if we get rid of old people, then it'll be good, or if we get rid of babies, it'll be good. But if you get rid of babies, there's no more people, and then they just die and they're old people, so you get rid of them and then there's no one. So, but like, well, it's just like everything you do could end up being bad.
Yeah, it's almost like in your attempt to create the perfect world, all you can do is create negative things. It's almost like I can't create a perfect world unless I create negative stuff to go along with it, and that violates the perfect world you're after. I'll let you have the final word on this, young man.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was just about to say. I think when you start talking about utopia or dystopia, good or bad, you get to what I think might be one of the themes of the book, that you cannot have good without bad, and you cannot have bad without good. Because The Giver even says, we relinquish color. We gain control of many things, but we relinquish color, and we relinquished choices, even, and memories.
Thanks very much. I think that's a nice way to summarize. Boy, believe it or not, an hour has almost gone past us, and we've had a fascinating conversation about this book. And I know we could have a lot more conversation about it, and I appreciate the fact that so many of you send in your prompt responses in advance. We'll share that with everybody, even the ones we weren't able to get to today, and other folks who have prompt responses as well. In about 15 seconds, Emily, any final thoughts?
I have a new thought about the play now, that their utopia failed because they didn't have love. You have to have love in a society, or it will fail.
All you need is love. And Prince William evidently has found love, because he made the choice today to announce his engagement to Kate Middleton. We felt the desperate need to weave that into the conversation. Thanks everybody for being a part of this conversation as we think about Lois Lowry's The Giver. Really glad that you're able to join us. We'll be back with Metro Theater on December 9th as we talk about bringing these characters to life in their stage adaptation. Bye everybody. Thanks Ladue. Thanks St. Louis County Library. Have a great day.